This is Heather Stephen, and you're listening to Pieces to Peace, Anchoring on the Other Side of Grief. This podcast focuses on people who have emerged from the depths of their grief, their transition from surviving the darkest of days to seeing the light again. Through my own experiences of grief, I have learned how healing it is to know that I am not alone. My hope is that those seeking comfort and relief will find some here and leave feeling reassured that there is life again. There are brighter days ahead, just around the corner. Hi, so I have my mom here, Colleen, but we just all call her Granny. I mean, even my husband calls her Granny. So many people just call her Granny. So we're excited to have you to tell your version of the Jacey story.
Thank you for asking me.
You're very welcome. Granny's a little nervous today, but I totally understand. This is, it's no small thing to talk about, but it's been a long enough time, and I don't know, I feel like you're in a really good place, but I'll let you be the judge of that and talk about that. So I am my mom's fifth child out of six. I am the favorite. And I think I may have mentioned that. I don't know if I mentioned that in my recording, but I think we all think we're her favorite because she just treats us all like we are her favorite. But I just say that because I just,
It's under their skin.
But we do have a very tight, close bond. And I think a lot of it is because of what we went through together with Jacey and things a little bit before that and ever since. So I always call her my angel on this earth because she just is. She's been my saving grace and my rock and my everything for all of these years. And now that I'm a grandma, I just cannot imagine having to go through what she went through that horrible, horrible early morning. And so I'm going to leave it up to you to start in with your story and start with a backstory if you want, like just what you would normally just, tell a stranger maybe or an old friend.
Okay, I will try my best to do that. I remember earlier in the week, or it was a week earlier somewhere, that Heather and I were talking, and I was telling her about a friend of mine that was a grandmother, and she lost a little grandchild while she was babysitting. And I said to Heather, I cannot think of anything in this world that would be worse than having one of your grandchildren die on your watch. That having him die is the worst thing, but then having him die on your watch would be unthinkable. And it wasn't a week later, and Heather had, because of her church responsibilities, 3 church meetings one Sunday. And her husband was out of town, and
he was in the hospital.
He was in the hospital.
And it was 2 church meetings, just so you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I thought, how is she going to drag those 4 little kids to sit there in church meetings for 2 hours solid? And so I said, let me keep them all night, and then that'll give you the time to rest up and get to church and do what you have to do, and then you can come back over and get them. And so we decided to do that. But that day she was so tired and so wiped out. She was what you would probably call a fussy baby. She wanted to be held a lot, which is normal for a baby.
For some, but
for some.
Definitely normal for her.
Yes, very normal for her. And so we decided we were going to go shopping and just make a good fun day of it and take the kids with us. And we ended up going to Subway, and that's where we finalized our plans for me to take the kids. And I said, I'll just take them right from here. I've got diapers and stuff like that at my house. So
we actually went home though.
Did we go home?
Because I had to get like the diaper bag and a couple of, some like clothes and more formula for you and stuff. So I did pass them off to you at the house.
Okay. Sometimes things get blurred in your mind and you think it was one way and it was really a different way.
But it's good that we're doing this together because there's going to be things that you say that I'm sure I forgot about. And things that I remember that I can refresh you. So
I mean, you probably remember a whole lot more than me.
I don't know, but our perspectives are so different. So I'm curious to hear how you're going to tell the story.
Both coming from different directions, really.
Yeah.
So I had the kids at my house, and we fed them dinner, and we played and did whatever. And it was getting close to bedtime. And so I fed Dee and changed her and made sure she was happy, as happy as she could be. And finally, after a long struggle, I got her to sleep. And just then, Heather's little Breton, who was, what, 7 or 9 at the time.
No, she was like 9 or 10.
Was she?
I think she was 10. Yeah, she was 10.
She came up to me and said, "Oh, Grandma, can I hold Jacey?" And I thought, no, she'll wake up and then I'll have to get her back to sleep. I said, "How about first thing in the morning? You can be the first one to hold her in the morning." And she was a little disappointed, but she said, okay, she would do that. So in the night, I had gotten up with her a couple of times and fed her and changed her and put her back to sleep. And I got up with her one time and fed her and changed her and put her back down. And she was sleeping in my bedroom with me and my then husband. And
But not in the bed.
no, not in the bed, no. And she was a little bit fussy that night. So I, took care of her in the night. And then I got her back to sleep and put her down. And this must have been about 4 o'clock in the morning. And then around 5, she started to fuss again. And I told my husband, I'm going to let her fuss for a few minutes because I know she's not hungry and I know she's not wet. So I'm just going to let her fuss for a few minutes and see if she'll go back to sleep. Well, pretty soon she was quiet and my husband decided to get up. And I said, please check on her when you get up. And he was probably 4 or 5 steps away where Jacey was sleeping. That's about how far away he was. And he went over there and he said, hey, there's something wrong here. I was out of that bed and over to that baby in about 1 step. I flew there. It scared me to death. And I picked her up, and it was like she was just silently sleeping. She wasn't cold. She wasn't blue. She just looked like she was just sound asleep, but she wasn't breathing. And I started immediately to cry. And I said, oh, Heavenly Father, please don't take this baby from her mother. Because Heather was going through such a hard time in her own life that I just couldn't imagine losing a baby on top of everything that she was going through. My husband and I laid her down on the bed and tried to give her CPR. And then I picked her up and took her in and put her on the floor right by the front door. And I had just called the paramedics first. And when they answered the phone, I told them, please, my baby stopped breathing. I need some help. And he said, are you giving her CPR? And I said, the best we can. And he said, let me walk you through it. So I held the phone and told my husband what to do. And we were both kind of working on her together to get her to breathe. And nothing seemed to help. And it seemed like it was about 2 or 3 minutes after I called the paramedics that they were at my house, not long at all. And they came in, and I had her laying there on the front room floor so they could get to her faster. And one of the paramedics started cutting her clothes off. And at the time, we didn't realize it, but he cut the end of her finger off. But she didn't cry. We didn't even know that it had happened until later on when we were at the hospital. Mm-hmm. So I just quickly threw on some clothes. I don't even remember what they were, if they matched, if they didn't match, whatever.
Didn't the kids wake up, or some of them?
Brittany woke up, but I didn't even know she had woken up. Mm-hmm. And I kept trying to call my son, Jonathan, who is Heather's youngest brother and my youngest child, and tell him, please come and help us. And he lived probably the closest. And no answer, no answer. I kept calling, I kept calling. Finally, I got through to him, and the paramedics were there still working on her, trying to get her to breathe. He answered the phone, and I said, Jetty, I think he's dead. And he said, Mom, what are you talking about? And being woken up from a sound sleep, he couldn't even relate to it. And he said, I'll be right there. So I put on the clothes that I don't even know what they were and ran out to the ambulance because they said I could go with her. And I didn't have shoes on. I didn't have anything. I just grabbed myself and ran out to the ambulance. And I kept looking back to see if she was starting to breathe. And I kept asking the driver, is she breathing? Is she breathing yet? No, but we're working on her. There was an attendant back there with her, and then there was the driver.
So you were sitting up front.
I was
I
sitting
didn't.
up
Okay, I didn't ever know that.
Yeah. And he said, just hang on, we'll be there in just a minute. And it was, I lived out in North Las Vegas by where Kohl's is now, and we were going to UMC. So that's, quite a drive, but it was like 5:30 in the morning, so there was hardly any traffic. It was on a Sunday morning, and we
sirens were like lights and sirens
yes,
on. They were going really
yes.
fast.
And my neighbors heard that because they turned them on before we even pulled out of my front yard.
Did they come with them on too? Do you remember? Like it wasn't.
I don't know. I might have heard them.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I did unlock my door in case they just wanted to come in.
Yeah.
Or if they were knocking or whatever. I wasn't sure. And so we got to the hospital. They ran her in, and they were in the emergency room. And they said I could go, but I had to, stand back, stand out of the way. And pretty soon, a doctor came over to me, and he said, she has no brainwaves.
Wait, he said that right off?
Right. After not too long, we were in there. You weren't there yet.
Wow.
And I said, and he said, where is her mother? And I said, she's home. And he said, you need to call her and have her come down. And I said, she's already on her way. And he said, well, don't let her drive. And so I knew then that my son had gone to pick her up and tell her.
Who told him then to go pick me up? Daryl or?
I think he just decided to, because I don't recall telling him, go get Heather. But I said,
because Daryl called me on the phone and said, your brother and Rebecca are coming to pick you up. Just stay there. Don't leave.
He must have.
So they maybe communicated or something.
Somehow, yeah. By that time, I had already left with the ambulance, and so I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
And when he told me that she had no brainwaves, I didn't know what to do. I mean, it wasn't my decision to do anything other than help her. Just help her. Get her breathing. That's all I ask, is just get that baby breathing. And he said, how long has she been without oxygen? And I said, I don't even know, but about a half an hour or something like that. And he just kind of shook his head. And then he went back over to her, because at one point, whoever was in the emergency room working on her were still working on her. And at one point, the doctor said, everybody stop right now. Get your hands off of this baby. Let me take care of her. And if I need you, I'll call you, or I'll ask you for your help. So they stood around, and then paramedics kept coming in to see how that baby was doing. And she was still lifeless, but I counted the paramedics, and there were 12 of them in there watching her.
So it must have been like firemen, paramedics, and then like EMT paramedics too, or something.
Everybody that was part of the ambulance. I mean, they weren't even the ones that drove us there.
Oh.
They had just heard that there was a baby in there.
Wow.
And so many of them came in, and there were nurses and other doctors, and everybody was frantically working on that baby to try to get her breathing. And so I don't remember if I was out in the waiting room. No, you were in I was in the emergency room, and they brought you in.
Mm-hmm.
And Heather said, my baby, what's wrong with my baby? And then she, of course, broke down and started to cry. I was, I think, already crying. You're at such a loss. the worst thing that you can ever imagine to happen happened. And it was not like I said, oh, that'll never happen to me. I never ever once thought that or said that, but I thought it did happen to me. And it affects everybody. And so they asked us, I guess, to go back into the waiting room, and they would let us keep us updated. So we went back into the waiting room, and before I know it, all 6 of my children were there with their spouses, and they were sitting on pins and needles waiting for us to come out and give them an update. And we had nothing new to tell them, that she still wasn't breathing. They were still working on her. And then a nurse did come out and say, the end of her finger has been cut off. Does anybody know how that happened? And at that time, I had no idea how it happened. I didn't even know it had happened. And they said, do you want us to call the plastic surgeon and have him come in? Well, that was sort of the last thing on our minds. We'd rather have her breathe than to have her finger fixed.
Yeah.
And so Heather said, no, we'll wait and see how she does.
I remember you asking David too, like you or we, I don't know, we're walking down the hall and you asked him to please use his priesthood and bring her back.
I did.
What did he say? I forget. Do you remember?
Yes, very clearly. I asked him and Jim both. And they're 2 of my sons that were the first ones there. And I said, please, please use your priesthood and bring this baby back. And I said, in fact, trade my life for hers. I want her to make it. I want that baby to live. And the boys both looked at me and shook their head and said, we can't do it, Mom. And I said, why? And they said, that's not for us to do. They did not get the feeling from the Spirit that it was the right thing to do. Jacey was needed somewhere else. Heavenly Father had other plans for that little girl.
Even though at this point we still weren't sure if she was completely gone.
No. But being 30 minutes without oxygen, sometimes it's better for them not to come around because they will be so brain damaged that I don't know what their life could be other than I have another granddaughter that is very brain damaged and
from the same type of thing, actually.
Same type of thing.
From like falling asleep in her nap and
just not waking up.
and yeah.
So, and I know Heather, we had watched Heather's sister struggle with this baby, and
to this day, who is now like what,
20
or
23?
No, like 19 or 20.
Is she 19 or 20? And she still struggles. They still call the ambulance. They call the paramedics. They've used Flight for Life I don't know how many times on that little girl. And I couldn't imagine Heather having to go through that very same thing. And I knew when the boys shook their head that they couldn't do anything for her. And I think they probably felt, this is not what Heavenly Father wants. He has other purposes for her. And so we were just in the waiting room waiting, and the rest of the kids came, and we were all just sitting on pins and needles. And another lady came in, and she was of a different religion. And she said, she got the drift of what we were talking about. And she said, my father is a minister or a pastor or something like that. Would you mind if you prayed for her? We said, absolutely not. That would be perfectly fine with us. We don't mind at all. And so she gets her little dad on the phone, and he's praying for her. And in every one of our hearts, I know we were all praying. We didn't care who the prayers came from. We just know that she needed prayers.
But I remember that now. He wanted to talk to me on the phone.
Is that what?
And he did. And I don't know what he was saying, but all I remember him saying, I mean, he was very evangelical, but he said basically that she was going to hell because she was an unbaptized infant.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yes. And I just did not feel good about that. I mean, and I do think he meant well. I think that's
Had good intentions.
yes, but of course that's not at all what I want to hear. And I do believe differently, and I know differently in my own faith. So that did not shake me, but it's like, really, you're going to say that to a mother,
grieving mother,
grieving and not sure if her child is going to make it. And anyway, it's just, it goes along with the things that people say during these times that are so unhelpful and well intended. And it's how you take it that, you can either take it and be offended and be upset and let it ruin your day, or you can just chalk it up to,
they don't understand.
Well-intended, well-meaning things. I mean, I don't know how that can come across well to anybody, but yeah.
Oh, for sure. Something like that. Especially, I don't, if that happened, I don't remember it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying it didn't. I'm saying I just don't remember.
Yeah. But yes, I mean, that did happen with the lady and her dad and him being on the phone and the prayer and that. And then he did want to talk to me.
So that's where you heard that from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some things can be very hurtful, but yet very well intended.
Sure.
And then we had several people from Heather's ward come up. And Stake come up to see how she was doing in the middle of everything. It's miraculous to see how, and I'm sure every church is like this, but how the members come to your side and offer their assistance and their faith and their hope and their prayers when there's a crisis in your family, no matter what kind it is. But we still waited and waited and waited. And they were going to put her in a room, and because they put the breathing machines on her.
Well, they put every machine on her. Like, basically, they were just, the machines were just
keeping her alive.
Yeah.
Is what they were doing.
But let me go back really quick to the point you were just making about how a ward, steps up and helps the members. I want to take it a little bit further, and you'll know what I'm talking about. In our stake, so I worked in the stake, but then you weren't in the stake, but Jim was in the stake, my brother, and Jonathan, who we call Jetty. Sorry, but it's Jetty. He was in the stake, and then because of the amount of time that our bishop spent with us at the hospital, and his wife spent at the hospital because she was taking pictures,
and she was your best friend.
She was a dear, yes, in
the ward, yeah.
And the different wards made sure that my brother Jim's family got meals, that Jetty got a meal or two. I'm not sure because it was just him and Rebecca at the time.
Yeah.
And then that our bishop got meals. And, that to me is just love and charity and compassion and, Christ-like service. And that part of it all just was the most, reassuring. And I don't know.
That's just the gospel in action.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. All right. Back to what you were saying.
Okay.
Sorry, that they were giving her a room. They had the machines on her.
Everything possible. And it was just basically a waiting game. And her father was not there for a very long time. And it was just Heather and her family. And her ex-husband's father flew in from, where did he live?
Missouri. And his sister.
Yeah. And they were a tremendous help to all of us. They were just such great people. And then her husband, Brian, came. They let him come out of the hospital long enough to see Jacey and whatever he felt he had to do, maybe say goodbye or just be there. And she finally, they told Heather that it was her oxygen level had gone down to like 40, wasn't it? On that.
I don't remember.
And it was going down very fast. And so it was just a matter of a few minutes and then she would be gone.
Well, because we'd been waiting for anything good, any kind of, response from her, because she hadn't urinated one time, and they so we knew that her kidneys weren't functioning, and she was filling up with all this fluid because
yes.
it wasn't going anywhere.
So puffy.
And I had heard that if this is what I had heard at first, that if a child under the age of 2 dies before 24 hours, they would for sure perform an autopsy. So I was trying to like
make sure
hold off for more than 24 hours so that they didn't have to do that to her body.
Mm-hmm.
But then after, so it was around like 27 hours or something, and I finally just said to the nurse, like, what are we waiting for?
Yeah, because she was going
and
downhill.
Then we made the decision to just, turn off the machines. And then at some point, that's when they said, no, it doesn't matter the time, it matters what their age is. So every child under the age of 2, it's mandatory that we perform an autopsy. And so I was like, I'm not too thrilled about that. So then once they took all the machines off, it was only minutes because she never took a breath on her own.
No.
So,
and I don't know if this is appropriate to say, but they let us pass her around, and everybody got to hold her that wanted to, and just love on her and kiss on her. And the nurse came in and asked Heather where she would like her buried, or where she would like what funeral home to use.
Maybe the funeral home, yeah.
And I said, let her be buried next to my mom and dad. My mom will take such good care of her. And Brian heard me say that. I wasn't telling Heather where she needed to bury her. I was just offering a suggestion. Brian got so furious with that he walked out of the room, and Heather felt like she needed to go talk him down off the ledge. And so she was gone, and she didn't get to do Jacey's very last moments.
Because they had taken her.
Yeah.
By the time I got back, she was gone out of the room.
And that was very crushing for Heather to not be able to deal with her baby and had to deal with a mad husband. And it was, I felt terrible. I certainly didn't mean to cause any kind of a reaction like that. I was just offering a loving opportunity.
Suggestion.
Yeah. To, if that's something that you might want to think about.
But this goes to show too that we just don't know how we're going to act or react when grief hits so heavily.
It does.
We just don't know, and we don't know what other people's reaction are going to be to something so simply small and simple. We just have no idea.
No idea.
And I think that's where we have to give grace to people and how they, show up for their grief,
Yeah, we never know, and we can't judge people by their grief. They have to grieve the way they have to grieve. But before we brought her to the hospital, my husband gave her a blessing, and I thought for sure that something would happen. And it did, but it wasn't the thing that I wanted. I wasn't the thing that we had prayed for. But those are the kind of things that you just have to accept and know that Heavenly Father's in charge. And He has a plan, and it has to be the way His plan was meant to be. As hard as it is sometimes to understand that. And so we went back to my house, and it just seemed like such a foggy nightmare. But the detectives were at my house, and my husband stayed there with the kids. Well, I went to the hospital, and when we got back, he was still there with the kids, and also the detectives were there. And he told me at one point they had our bedroom marked off with that yellow tape cotton. I don't know what it said.
Yeah.
And that literally crime scene, I think it says. And I was absolutely sick over that. And the woman detective took me in my bedroom and talked to me first, and then she took Heather in and talked to her privately. And I said, if I've done something wrong, I want to know it. But I said, I raised 6 kids and they were all fine. I can't imagine what was wrong with this baby. I just felt heartsick. What is Heather going to think of me? She'll be so mad at me when it all settles down and everything. And there was not one time, not one single time that Heather even made mention that she died while she was in my care. It it was the hardest thing for me to accept is I let her die. What could I and should I have done differently? And the man that was the chief of the fire chief for North Las Vegas, he was in our stake, and he came over with the rest of the stake presidency. He was, I think, the first or second counselor, and the stake president gave Heather a blessing, and then this gentleman asked me, "Can I give you a blessing?" And I said, "Yes, please do." And he said, "Heavenly Father wants you to know that his will has been done." And that was probably the most comforting thing that I had heard. But the funny thing about it is, my son Jim gave me a blessing while we were sitting in the waiting room at the hospital. And he said, word for word, the same thing. Heavenly Father wants you to know that his will has been done.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Or remember, at least.
Jim said it first, and then President Lytle said it second. So I'm thinking, maybe I'm not to blame. Maybe Heavenly Father just wanted it that way for whatever reason. And it's something we'll never know until the next life. And then I'm sure it'll be clear. And Heather and I often think about her running around in her little Mary Jane shoes when she was, 2 or 3 years old. And
who, Jacey?
Don't you remember us talking about that?
That we would see her doing that? Because she was only 10 weeks.
No, but at the time when she was 2 or 3, she would have been running around in her little shoes.
Oh, I see. Yeah, gotcha.
And she was, at every age, I think we thought, wonder what she'd be doing now. Wonder what she'd be doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And poor Heather's daughters, they were like her little mothers.
Mm-hmm.
They just helped Heather so much, and they loved that baby. They loved her. And Jacob was very indifferent.
Because he was only 4.
Yeah, and he didn't understand what was going on.
He did end up grieving, though, but many years later, which is, different story. But he didn't want to go to the funeral. He just wanted to play and,
And at one time, we came home, I think it was from the funeral, and outside of Heather's bedroom door, there was all of his toys that were in boxes piled up on the floor.
In front of the door.
In front of the door.
Mm-hmm.
And Heather said, "Jacob, what is this?" And he said, "I'm doing that so my dad can't get away." He didn't want him to get out.
He didn't want him to leave again. And he wanted his dad to be there. He was very
confused by everything that went on. And that in itself was very heartbreaking to watch how he suffered. And then to watch how the little girls suffered. It was just very, very difficult. And then I think I spent the next month sleeping at Heather's house with her because I didn't want her to be alone, to wake up in the middle of the night and not have somebody there. And her really, really best friend in the world lived in Utah. And of course, she came right down. And I remember one night, all 3 of us were sleeping in the same bed, although I don't think we got much sleep. We were just in there, and we were talking and just reminiscing, and we had pictures of Carrie holding Jacey and just a little few things.
Which was only like maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks before or something before that she had come to visit.
Yep.
And then got to hold her and stuff. And then,
And so we had those pictures. And even at 10 weeks old, you still have a lot of memories. And
not enough, though.
Not enough, no. But you can remember so many little details that you probably normally wouldn't remember. And so, anyway, came the time that we needed to go to the funeral home and pick out a coffin.
Coffin, I love how you use that. Such an old term.
What is the new
casket? Coffin. Kind of like how Juliet was saying that we're going to the graveyard, which is such like an old term for a cemetery.
For a cemetery, yeah.
But okay.
Yeah, we picked out the casket, and Brian's dad went with us, and April went with us, and then Heather and I went, and that was all. And I kept thinking to myself, poor Heather, her husband should be here by her side. He should be here by her side. And I tried not to stew and fuss about that, but it was a very difficult thing to go around and look at those teeny tiny little caskets, as you call them, and to think about placing your baby in one of those, and you won't see her till the next life. And then we picked it out and then went back to Heather's house, and there was more food and things to eat there than you could ever eat in probably a lifetime.
Well, and I remember, wasn't it, because I was trying to be healthy at the time, so everything was like fruits and vegetable platters and things like that, and like maybe, I don't know. And then I think somebody said, like, are we ever going to get any chocolate? Like, just chocolate, something.
Something.
And someone overheard it. I don't know if it was like the Relief Society president or what, because I wasn't even eating that much, to be honest. So then once that got out, I think they put, I don't know, once that got
Somehow
out,
the
then
word got out.
like,
Yeah.
you know, chocolate, cake, and cookies galore showed up.
Oh.
It was amazing. You just said it and it came.
It was there. It was there.
Yeah.
And Heather's Stake Relief Society president and her counselor were like saving graces for Heather. They had come over when I don't think anybody else was there, just you and me, and they bought us lunch. Remember that?
Did they paint the girls' nails that time? Didn't they sit at the table and paint the girls' nails? And then Jacob came up to me because he had his little R, like he couldn't say his R's. And he was like, "Are they an Oswald?"
Yeah, his R word.
R word, like we just Oswald, but
we knew what he meant.
I thought they painted at least one of the girls' nails at that time. I don't know.
There are so many things
they were
that are
amazing.
So lightly remembered in what sequence.
Yes.
And they bought us a really nice dinner from wherever it was. I can't even remember where it was now, but it was really a nice one. And they were the sweetest, most spiritually helpful people you can ever imagine.
I mean, so many people showed up.
And so many people, yes.
And so many things behind the scenes that either we don't know or, you know, or
nobody will ever know.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And it was so spiritually comforting. And I can remember Heather's stake president. Heather said that I don't know if I should say this, but Heather said that she would so want a visit from Jacey just to let her know that everything was okay. And he said, "You deserve that, if that's what you want, if I'm not mistaken."
He said, like, you are, as her mother, you are entitled to see her before she's buried. Didn't he say something to that? I remember him say, you are entitled to see her. And for whatever reason, all these years I've remembered, I thought that he said before she is buried or, you know, soon thereafter or something like that. I don't know.
And he said, but you remember, you have to keep your home quiet. You have to allow for the spirit to come into your home. So from that point on, and sometimes when people get together and they haven't seen each other for a long time, they have funny stories to tell about years before and things like that. And sometimes it gets a little carried away. So we tried very hard to keep the noise down and to remember what the stake president's council was, to make sure that your home is a place where the spirit can dwell.
Well, and it, you know, it may not have ever happened, you know, and there's always a reason for someone to come and visit, from what, you know, I studied, because that was really hard for me, having that expectation and then it just like not ever really happening. And I always wondered, is it something I've done or haven't done? You know, what is it? And then I read in a book, I don't know if someone gave me that book because of that, but just that, you know, they have to have a purpose. And I always thought, am I not enough purpose for that? But, you know, it just takes faith for me to hang on, and maybe one day, but, you know, yeah, that was hard. And I don't blame him for saying that or any, I
Yeah,
mean, it's just, it is what it is. But anyway, so
I can remember Heather having a dream one night about my father. And he came to her in this dream and she said, Grandpa, have you seen Grandma and Paul? That was my older brother that had passed away. And Michael. And he said he had seen Paul and Grandma, but he hadn't seen Michael. And he said that he was in such a hurry. He had so much to do that he could not stay. And so that was the end of that dream. And I've often thought, gosh, if we only knew what went on after this life, even for babies, because we know they're probably not babies
anymore.
anymore. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your own personal grief after that. Because I know you tried to show up and be strong for me, and you were for me in my presence. But I'm sure there were many days, months, years of just, I don't know, just sadness and tears and, quiet grief so that you didn't, show me or worry me or take anything away from me, I guess. But I mean, you've said that you grieved the loss of her, but you also grieved watching me grieve. So talk a little bit about that.
I can remember one time you were somewhere at the store or something, and you went outside and you called me on the phone and you were sobbing. You said, Mom, I can't do this. I cannot do this. I'm just so sad. And I said, just stay where you're at. I'll be right there. And I went up there and you were just sobbing. I often wonder what people must have thought as they walked by. And I put my arms around her and I thought, I can see why she can't do this because I can't do this. I know that I had to be there for her because at that point she didn't have anyone else to be there for her. Her husband wasn't there.
And I only had you as a parent. I didn't even have my dad.
No, he
So
wasn't around in the picture.
at all. And it fell on you to give me counsel, to buoy me up, to be like the supportive parents, you know, that was a lot while you are also heavily, heavily, deeply grieving yourself.
I can honestly say that it was the worst experience of my life. And I've lost many, many loved ones, including both my parents and three of my
Brothers.
siblings.
Yeah.
And but seeing that little tiny baby and watching her mother grieve so desperately for her, I there were times when I thought, I can't make it through this either. I can't. But what other choice do you have? You don't have a choice. You just have to do what you have to do. And I would pick myself up and say, okay, we're going to try again. Today's going to be a better day. And 5 minutes into the day, I was in tears again. And I
because it changes.
It
from
changes
minute to minute.
Yep.
Sometimes.
Yep. Sometimes you think, okay, now I'm good now. I can do it. And like I said, 5 minutes later, you're in tears. You're just a mess. You just wonder what your purpose is in life. I think that truly the hardest thing for me was watching my daughter grieve. And there was nothing I could say or do that would make her feel any better. And I know there's things that have to be done, at a funeral and after a funeral. But I happened to just, anytime I wanted, I dropped into her house. And I went there one day. It was probably, maybe a month after she had passed away. And I went upstairs and Heather was cleaning out these stuff. And
Was it a month?
Well,
I thought I had her stuff out for a while because I used it and I smelled it and I had it near me in my closet for.
Oh, I remember.
Well, I couldn't smell it anymore.
You
but
carried that sock around with you.
a blanket and a sock, but that was only the day of the funeral.
But you carried it like you weren't going to let go of it
Yeah.
for anything.
Yeah.
And because you could smell her
Mm-hmm.
on that. And when I saw her putting away her little bed and her car seat and
Her little bouncer.
her little bouncer and even the little tiny, tiny diapers and all that stuff, I don't think Heather even knew how much I grieved over that. Well, I don't know what I thought. Maybe she should leave him there forever. I don't know. And I know that's not healthy either. But that was probably one of the very hardest things was to watch her. And I know it's something that had to be done.
I think for me, in my way, because I had so much going on in my personal relationship, that I didn't want reminders, and I wanted to not have those things around to trigger that immediately, because I was already dealing with so much, and it, like, I tried to avoid grief. I mean, that's no secret. I didn't want to grieve and feel that way.
That's what I said. Heather has not yet grieved. And I don't know whether she ever did or not, the way that normal people would.
Is there a normal though, you
Well,
know?
for me, I would have thrown myself on the floor and kicked my legs and cried and carried on. And
But I didn't have the luxury of doing that, because I had three other little people who needed me every single day.
I know. And you had to get up every morning.
Every morning. There was not one day that I laid in bed.
No, there
Even if
wasn't.
I wanted to. I couldn't, because I needed to take care of them and keep some kind of normalcy in their little lives.
Oh, and I know that. And I know that. And that was very hard for me to watch you have to do that. And I think that that's one reason why I stayed at your house for so long, so that I could help you function through those
Yeah.
times. And I was watching something on TV last night, and a man said, there is nothing harder in this world than for a parent to lose one of their children. It was John Benet Ramsey's story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what John had said. There's nothing harder in this world than to have to see one of your children gone before you. And I thought, I know just what you're saying. I know just what you're saying. I know how you feel. And there's not very often that you can say that actually really know. And I have no idea how John Benet or John Ramsey and Patsy Ramsey felt with their daughter being murdered. I think that would be a horrible thing. But just the emptiness that you go through when you lose a child. And then when you lose a grandchild, then you know that your normal will never be the same.
Right. So, with all of that, where, for you, how long do you think it was for you before you could, genuinely smile again, or feel joy, or like feel like you've emerged out of those really dark days? How long do you think it was when you look back?
Still not gone.
Oh, great. What are we doing here then?
No, there are things that help bring you back to reality. And one of those is the gospel, of course. And when you go to church and people are so kind, and yes, they do often say the wrong things, but like you said, that's just people. They don't mean anything by the wrong things. But you do know that they're acknowledging what you have gone through. And anybody that has lost a child can sense a little bit of what you're going through. And I think it was probably, I don't know, it must have been, I hate to say it, close to a year. And
Why do you hate to say it? A year is still like really new.
yeah, but I think because I'm not a crier, and I I'm just an odd person. And I think
What does Tad call you? Crazy?
crazy.
Yeah.
He thinks I'm crazy.
That's my husband, by the way. Yes.
Every morning I get up and drink a half a cup of crazy.
Yes. Yes.
And I'll be the first to admit it. I do. I don't know what it is, but I do.
So, do you feel like you gained a better perspective of the atonement or, became closer to the Savior during that time
Oh, there's no
or
question.
after?
There's no question. How, and I thought of a number of times. My first husband, his grandmother said that she felt like when you die, you just are put in the ground and that's it, it's over. And I thought, how do people like that ever get through a death?
Yeah.
I can't imagine thinking that the ground is the end. And I know that one day we'll all have a very joyous reunion when we see that little girl that probably won't be a little girl
Mm-mm.
anymore.
And all of our family that have gone before us. I think it will be a beautiful reunion.
I do too. And those are the kind of things, those little tiny, sometimes you just get a hint of what may happen. And those are the kind of things that really do get you through what you're going through.
All right, so I have two questions. They'll probably really put you on the spot. I try to tell people this before, and then some I remember and some I don't, but was there anything that somebody said, did, or offered to you during that time of just really, your deep grief that was especially meaningful to you or helpful?
Yes, I had a dear friend, and her name is Nancy Skinner. And she had lost a 17-year-old in a car accident when she lived in Wyoming. And talked to her quite a bit off and on. Sometimes we'd go months and months and not talk. And I asked her, how did you make it through that? And she said, it was 2 years before I ever saw the sunshine. And I thought about that a whole lot. And I thought the weight that she carried. She had her daughter for 17 years. We had the for 10 weeks. She had many, 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 many times more memories to deal with. And she made it. She got to a point, and I thought, when will I get to that point?
So you're saying that that was helpful because it just gave you hope
It
that
gave me hope.
at least by 2 years you could hopefully feel that light again or feel
The sunshine.
free from some of the heaviness of grief.
And there is a lot of heaviness, and as much as you try to stuff it down or put it away or deal with it, it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get around it. You have to feel it, I think. And that's why I worried about you so much, because I don't think you were feeling it the way that you needed to.
Yeah, I don't know because you don't, I don't know what I don't know, but
you were just very, I don't know. You would talk about it if somebody would ask you something about it, but you didn't ever offer.
no, it was very hard for me to talk about it like details. Like you loved to talk about the little memories, few that we had. You would talk about details of her, like her appearance or her cry or whatever, and that I could tell those were things that you needed to talk about, but for me it was so hard for me to hear anything very specific about her, and I'm sure it was because I was trying to avoid it at all costs because I was in survival mode with my relationship. And so it was all just meshing together, and I was trying so hard to separate it and not have to grieve both things at the same time, and it just.
You had more on your plate, I think, than anybody I have ever known at one time to have to deal with. And how you came out of it has always been a miracle to me. And
A savior. I mean, he perform miracles still today in our own lives and in our hearts, especially through the atonement. I mean,
especially,
I know that that's the only way I made it through because I was given strength that was not my own. I know that. And I don't think any of us mothers could go through something like that, or fathers or grandmothers could go through something like that without receiving heavenly power.
Help. Yeah.
So
I agree.
Okay, last question. Do you have any, like just any advice for maybe another grandparent who may have faced a similar situation or have lost, a grandchild or just grieving some, just anything that you could offer. It doesn't even have to be another grandparent, but just anything you could offer as, to give hope.
Well, I think where there's life, there's hope, and there's hope with your other children, your other grandchildren. I don't know what I would have done if she would have been my only grandchild and I lost her. I I don't know how I could have stood up against that. But knowing that I had many, many, many other grandchildren, and my children still needed me, even though they were all married and had their own children, it's something that it takes time, and you have to take the time. Most people do. I don't think you did, to grieve it.
I do, but
and be aware of what's happening. If it helps you to talk about it, then you need to talk about it. And I know there's times when I've been in a store and I will hear somebody say, well, I lost a such and such. And I don't think I could do something like that. But if that's what helps that person, then she needed to do that or he needed to do that.
Right.
And like you said before, we all grieve in our own way. Sometimes people have no idea that you're grieving. And you try hard to hide it and cover it up. And most of the time you do, which you did.
Yes, I did.
And I don't think people would ever know that you had just lost a baby wherever you went.
Unless they knew me.
Unless they knew
for sure. But yeah.
Anybody else would never have known. And that's okay, because that's your way of handling it.
And I think that's a lot of people's, a story that causes grief, like a personal story that causes grief. The world is not necessarily worthy of hearing that, because they're just, they're not, you can't always trust, I don't know, that strangers will hear your story and then respect it, or, give it the attention or the, I don't even know, that it deserves. And so a lot of times, I had to make a decision oftentimes, and it would be a last minute decision when someone would say, how many children do you have? At first it was like, I didn't know what to say. Because it would be dishonest if I said 3, but I actually had 4, or I was, somehow forgetting her or betraying her. But then I didn't feel like I wanted to answer that to every stranger that asked me that. And so I had to make a decision quick, like, is this person the type of person that could receive that information and then
still be respectful of it?
Yes. And like that was really tricky for me. I didn't love having to do that.
I watched you with that many times. People would say that. And
because they wouldn't always just stop with, how many children do you have? What are their names? What are their ages?
How old are they?
It's like,
are they?
I don't really, if it's 2 years after, like, what do I say? I have one that, died 2 years ago. She would have been 2, or what, I don't know. It was just like, I didn't want to get into that, because then most people are just super awkward about it.
They have no idea.
They don't know what to do with that. And I didn't want to put people in that position, number one. And 2, I didn't want to see that awkwardness, because I wanted just more grace and love and attention and compassion towards or anything that had to do with her. Like,
For sure.
Anyway.
I think my only thing I could say to people to get through something like that is you just have to turn it over to the Lord. That's the only thing that you can do. I don't know. It doesn't matter what religion you are, what you believe, what you don't believe, but He's there for all of us. And He just waits for us to ask.
That's great. That is great advice. Well, Mama, it was so good to talk about this, and
I don't know that we have in years.
Not to this
detail.
Huh? Yeah, and our different views of, how we saw the events take place, and it was good to hear it and, talk about her. It's been a long time, that even, anything in depth about her has come up. I mean, I have pictures of her around the house and all of that, but, it's just nice to talk more in depth about the actual day of, and just
the little things that happened.
Not forget. It's a terrible tragedy, absolutely, but sometimes it's good to just remember it and talk about it. And yeah, I'm glad we did this.
Keep remembering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on and sharing your feelings about it. And I love you to pieces for it.
I love you to pieces without it.
Okay.
With or without.
Well, good. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hey listeners, thank you for tuning in today. I hope you felt encouraged and gained some insight. If you want to hear more inspiring stories, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to check out the website at pieces2peace.net. If you or someone you know has a story you'd like to share, send an email to heathersteven@pieces2peace.net. Until next time, keep moving forward.